it's sometimes funny that some of my best students start out being my worst student. Like I've had a lot of kids that I've like, one kid I'm thinking about right now, I dragged him off the floor, kicking and screaming and crying on his first day. His mom had to pull him out of the school. And now he's the top of his class. He's absolutely perfect every single day, his attitude. I had another kid, he flicked me off his first day of class. He gave me a middle finger right to my face. And he says, "It's okay, my mom says I can do this." And he's one of my best students.
I'll give you some push-ups on that middle finger, why don't you?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Conversations from the Hearth. This morning, we are joined by Master West and Mrs. West from Decatur Martial Arts in Illinois. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us on the program. We're looking forward to talking with you guys.
I love that Decatur Martial Arts logo right behind you. We need to get one ourselves. Do you guys do virtual classes?
We have not, and we didn't over the last year or two.
Gotcha. It'd be a good space for it because you got that nice logo in the background. That's why I asked.
Oh yeah. We thought about it. We did, instead of virtual classes while the weather was nice. So there's the place where we practice has like 100 acres. Oh, and so we did class outside. There's plenty of space to be 6 feet apart there for sure.
Yeah, we tried that for a while. It was challenging in its own ways. We did it on the parking lot out there on the asphalt. So
yeah, I bet that was a little warm.
Yeah. In Texas, it can get like 100 degrees outside. So.
I can't imagine.
I think the people that showed up to those classes afterward were kind of like, yeah, we really did that. We really were out there. We were, doing our techniques and everything.
The Phoenix was definitely reborn.
Yes.
No doubt.
So, Master West, we met at our International Masters Seminar out there in Chicago, and it was just such an honor to meet you. You seem like such a nice guy, and I wanted to have you on the show to talk to you about some different things. I think today we wanted to talk a little bit about character development and how we can have a strong impact on the students, maybe some stories of such development. But before we get started, because my viewers don't really know much about you, can you tell me a little bit about your martial arts career and how you got started?
Sure. So, sorry, go ahead.
And then also, Miss West, if you can tell us a little bit about your journey as well afterwards, that'd be great.
So I started martial arts between 6th and 7th grade. I started at a local Y. There was a karate instructor there. His name was Ron Ayton. Awesome guy, loves the Lord. That was the first time that I really experienced like marrying Christianity, my faith, with martial arts. So he is a great example of that. He was an usher at our church. Didn't know that at the time because we went to a large church, and but come to find out, he was a police chief in a local city. And so lots of great things there, lots of good stories about self-defense that he shared, about people in the community that he just encouraged to do martial arts because of, like domestic battery situations and different things. So he had a lot of hands-on experience. He's a Marine. So that a lot of real life things there that he shared in class for sure. So that's kind of where it started with me, was that. And I did, so that style was Go-Juru. That's a Okinawan based system from Japan. And so I studied, didn't end up getting my black belt there. We didn't do promotion tests, maybe like once every year and a half. Like it was very, very old school, I guess you could say. So I did martial arts with him for about 7 years, and did a few different styles with him. He had, I think, his 7th degree in karate in that system, and he kickboxed professionally for a long time before he was older. And he also studied Aikido Jiu-Jitsu, and so he kind of intermarried all those things together. With the kickboxing, he did some higher kicks, whereas karate, they didn't do a lot of higher kicks. Not to say that they could, but it was just wasn't something we practiced in class often. I'd always been interested in doing the higher kick. So when he asked me if I wanted to train with some of his black belts in he called it Tsubaki Kai, kickboxing, I said, yeah, absolutely. So that was a great opportunity. I got to work with a black belt. His name was Troy, and he was, I think at the time, about 4 years younger than me, but you know, like he hit really hard. So that was, you know, that was a really great experience to get hit by someone that was younger than me and say, wow, you know, like it doesn't matter what your age is, you know, if your power and technique is good, then, you know, you can hit guard regardless. And so that was just a really unique, interesting experience that I really value and talk about, you know, even now as an instructor. And then, so I did those things for about 7 years. And then I started doing Taekwondo at a local school here in town, and trained with them up until about my second degree black belt. And then took some time off from there, and you know, like finished my master's degree in education. So I had my master's in educational meant to be like a principal or an administrator or some type. And while I was doing that, I started Kung Fu and did Kung Fu for about 3 years. And that was a whole different thing than karate or Taekwondo. And you know, if you did like low stances in karate, if you're familiar with karate stances, it's a lot different than what we teach for modern Taekwondo, especially. And it was really, really low, just everything. So horse stance was like, you know, like sitting on like a small garbage can. Like we did horse stance training, and it was rough. I learned how to do a cartwheel and a round off for the first time. The kind of what we would consider forms there. Their version of forms had some more acrobatic stuff in it, a lot of partner things in it. So we think of things as, you know, one-on-one, or maybe 2 or 3 attackers, or an attacker from a different direction. Whereas in the Kung Fu system that I studied, the forms that they did, there were 3 stages to each form. Like each belt had, each sash rather had like 3 stages, like a first, second, third degree type thing, or a third, second, first. It kind of goes backwards the way we think about it, third being the lowest and then first being the highest. So so for example, the second form that you work on with them, the first part of the form, which is for third degree, you learn one set of like attacking and defending motions. And like, it's not like it's not maybe 20 or 30 moves like we would think of our forms. It's like 50 or 60 moves, but they didn't think of them moves. They just thought of them as like series of combinations, like of like we would think of self-defense. And then the second part of the form, you would learn kind of the opposition, the mirroring of that. And it was totally different technique, you know? And then like that third and final stage would be, you would work with a partner, usually a higher rank than you. And then, you know, you would put those 2 things together, and it would look like a choreographed fight scene. It was, you know, it was just totally different. I had thought about forms or kind of before that. And it was just a really, really, you know, interesting, entertaining, fun kind of thing, but everything was like very applicational. You know, there were like dive rolls and throws and cartwheels and flying kicks and spinning kicks, and, you know, like those double forearm blocks in the forms and stuff. And it wasn't always light either. I remembered I was practicing with one of the 4th degree black sashes, and I didn't move fast enough. He thought I was moving faster, and I thought I was moving okay, and it didn't go the way it was planned. And I got like a cartwheel kick like right here. And so like, it wasn't hard, but it was enough to like cut like my nose right there. And I was like, whoa. So that was a really eye-opening experience, because I'd never, you know, sparred with like a black sash before, or went through the form with someone who was that much higher than me. And man, he was a big guy, but he was moving really fast. So I did Kung Fu for about 3 years and got pretty close to black sash, but decided that was wearing my knees out a little bit because of all the low stances. And, you know, I was only in my early 30s at the time, but I wanted to keep doing martial arts for the next 30 or 40 years. So I thought it would be, you know, best for me to take some time off from the stances. So I took a couple of years off from martial arts, and then started Taekwondo with another instructor here in town again. And yeah, I went to 3rd degree with her, and then tested fourth not too long ago with some of the people that we did, the person that was running the seminar that we did through WTMU. So that was a really good experience too. And then we're here running our own school, which is not something that I ever imagined at the age of 12 when I started martial arts. That was never an aspiration I had. But about 4 or 5 years ago, we started doing some work in the public school with one of my friends and I, and then one thing led to another, and they didn't have space for us because of a wrestling program in the public schools, and decided that because we weren't a IHSA, it wasn't a state sponsored sport. I was like, well, it's an Olympic sponsored sport. Like, how much better can you get than that? But they, they just didn't value that as much as we did. It was just two totally different mindsets. And so then we decided to start one of our pastors at church approached us several times in the past, but we were just really committed to that program at the school. With the school district, and then he said, hey, what about if we gave you guys a space here at school at the church? So we have a good space. We got to paint it last year, and so this logo is maybe about a year old or so, right? Maybe no, we painted it. Yeah, we painted it this summer. So the room got a whole overhaul. You would have been, so this was like a God created the earth kind of space scene. It used to be behind us, and now it looks like a, that's our logo, and it looks like a traditional martial arts school. So it's, pretty neat just how sometimes life guides, God and life guide you. And it's just really interesting, some of those things that happen. You start one thing and you never think, this could be your future. So
it's a beautiful story. There's been a lot of really cool experiences there along the way. Most people I've met, they usually just train at one school their whole life. And because of that, they don't really understand how the martial arts community kind of comes together and the different pockets that exist. So that's really cool that you had those different experiences. I think it probably made you the great master that you are today because of all those experiences you had along the way.
And that's kind of one of the reasons why we just call it Decatur Martial Arts, because like stylistically, our main style is Taekwondo. But as you probably know from studying in Korea, like I had never, the two instructors that I've studied Taekwondo with didn't really teach like too much throwing. And so I think that throwing and grappling is an important part of self-defense. And so we do a little bit of that here. And if it wouldn't have been for like the Aikido and different things, then we wouldn't have known how to do that very well. And Kung Fu was the same way. Just each martial arts has covered kind of like a different proximity range. And it's just, like you said, just having the value of just studying different martial arts and then kind of landing in one place is taking different perspectives is I think extremely valuable. I think many times what I've experienced in martial arts from some instructors is that they'll say, oh, my martial art is the best. It's the only one to do. And if you do something else, like maybe they have like a little bit of respect for that. But if you don't do what they do and you don't do it the way they do it, then it's like, it's not good. It's not good. It's not, maybe, let me rephrase that. It's not that it's not good. It's just not good enough. Yeah. And so, studying different martial arts, I think some systems, like when we do Olympic sparring, there's no punching to the face. So like, yeah, someone who's done karate or boxing or, different things like that, they would say, well, I'm never going to win this fight because there's no punching to the face. Yeah. And so, when we do some self-defense scenarios, and I wanted to talk about some of that later with the character development, that's one of the things that we talk about is that, yeah, in real life, you're not going to spar like you would in an Olympic sparring class. Yeah. So we do different kinds of sparring too, just because, life and class aren't the same. Life and class are not the same sometimes. I mean, it's good if you can make them the same, but in some people's mind, they just, they've never been in a real fight situation. And not that that's our goal is to get in a fight, but if you have never had that before, then you might think that, yeah, my martial art is the only way to go. And no, there's a lot of different angles that you can look at things from.
That's a big problem we have, that sort of dogma and martial arts elitism in the martial arts community, and something that, I and my students and my school, we've always tried to move away from, is seeing, respecting all martial arts, all martial artists. I really feel like every martial art has some great wisdom to teach us,
Completely agree.
The ones that evolved in these really, I call them like an aquarium, where it didn't really have any external feedback. So sometimes they kind of developed really, really specific techniques. Even those martial arts have a lot to teach, because there's some kernel of truth that original founding master discovered, that he sort of built that entire martial art around. And if you can find that truth, whether, in Taekwondo, that's probably pivot and extension and economy of motion and center line, things like that. But in judo, it might be, if somebody's closer to me, I have more control over it. If it's farther away, I have less. If I push them, they want to resist, so I can use that to gain momentum into my technique, breaking their balance, those sorts of things. So every martial art is something great. Even I did Kung Fu for a little while as well in college, and wow, yeah, those are some deep stances. And a lot of the techniques I found, really difficult to apply, like an oxbow or something. I think I'd just rather punch someone in the face and hit them with my wrist. But I will say that, doing one finger push-ups and, holding this ridiculously deep horse riding stance, and some of the stuff I've seen on TV, but I've never attempted, like, dragging a log by my iron eggs, there's definitely a lot of respect that needs to be had for that discipline, and all disciplines. Yeah. And so, I love when I meet people like you who really understand that, because it's become such a divisive place sometimes in the community, which is too bad. So anyway, Miss West, can you tell us a little bit about your adventure?
Sure. Well, I didn't have any martial arts experience until I met him and we started dating, and he dragged me to a couple of the karate classes, which I really enjoyed. And then he signed me up for a women's self-defense class once he started Taekwondo. So I started that. I really enjoyed it. It was for like a 6-week course or something. Yeah. And I told him I enjoyed it. And he said, well, that's good, because I signed you up for a year of Taekwondo. and I wasn't very happy. And I did it anyway. And he's like, well, you don't have to go through promotion or anything if you don't want to. But I started the classes, and I'm like, well, what's the point of doing it if I'm not going to get promoted? I've been sitting on the side watching the other ranks do their stuff. Now I've kind of learned it. I might as well get promoted. So I got promoted up to second degree black belt, and then he quit, and I went for another 6 months, and then I ended up quitting. I ended up getting sick, and so I was done with martial arts for several years. When he started back up again, I did too, but just a little bit. I ended up finding out that I had multiple sclerosis. So I couldn't do a lot of the things that I used to be able to do, which was really, really frustrating to me. And it's still pretty frustrating to me usually whenever I train without, I can teach and I'm fine, but whenever I train, I get really frustrated with it just because my body won't let me do what I used to be able to. But yeah, that's kind of how I started. I did Kung Fu for a couple months, but that was while I was trying to figure out what was medically wrong with me. So it wasn't good. It was really, really difficult to do Kung Fu. I'm also just kind of tend to be one of those stubborn people that don't like to go outside of my comfort zone with, different styles and things. So it was a lot harder for me than it is for him. He's more open to things, and I'm more slightly stuck in my ways of doing certain things. So, but yeah, whenever he started up at the other school that we were at, I came and helped out whenever I could. I was going back to school at the time, so I didn't help out as much. But whenever we started this up, I've been teaching most of the classes. Yeah. So
the school schedule, when the school year started for kids, for like elementary, high school, grade school and stuff, we were told like one schedule, and then the week before, and so we based we kind of adjusted the schedule during the summer to reflect so families could get used to that schedule for the school year and be planning ahead for that. Because, we try to do our class schedule based on what fits families well and not change it like all the time. Like we've only changed it maybe a couple of times in the last 3 or 4 years. And so there was going to be some busing changes. And so we adjusted our class schedule to reflect those and started class at 4 instead of like 3:30 like we had before. And then come to find out a week before school starts, they moved the school schedule so that school started an hour later during the day. So that time that we gave, the extra 45 minutes or so that we gave families to allow for a little bit later busing time, then jumped another hour. And so when we started class at 4, I can't even get there. So she's been teaching all the first class, all the 4 o'clock classes. And then I get there at like 4:15, 4:30, which is when a lot of the kids have been getting there too, just because of the school time and the busing changes. And so we moved the class schedule back another hour to 5 for after Christmas. So we'll start that class schedule tomorrow. But yeah, so she's been teaching a lot of the classes, and that's a totally new experience for her because she's not used to teaching a whole class by herself. She's usually us doing it together, or, like me leading and her helping, or, like her leading and then me helping, always having a second set of hands. So it's been a growing experience, I think, for her. So it's been good, I think.
That's cool that you guys have each other's back like that, and that you can.
I'm sorry, can you say it again?
It's cool that you have each other's back like that, And
yeah.
Difficult situation to be in. I also run my school with my wife, although these days she's been very busy raising our 3 kids. So she's been coming off the mat. And I just had one, well, I think I was telling you about it right before I came back, or right after I got back, I had my daughter. So yeah, she's been really busy with her. So, but in the future.
I remember you saying that you were promising to help extra when you got back.
Yeah. I've got a little bit in my house, but it's been okay. So, sounds like you guys had a long, history in the martial arts and accomplished a lot of things, and, really excited to have you on the show. Today, we really wanted to kind of dive into character development and how we can have a strong impact on the children and the adults that we work with. I think, when I was in high school, I was trying to figure out my future, and I very, very seriously was contemplating becoming an English teacher. But in the end, I decided to become a martial arts instructor because it's just like one grade even better, because like English teacher is great, and I love English and I love teaching. But if I can have the same student for 10 years, that's even better. Like if you teach English, you have a student for 1 semester and then you never see them again. It could be the best student ever. You can have a great relationship and then they're gone. And it's so sad. But with martial arts, you can stay with them forever, and you can talk not just about English, but you can talk about philosophy, and you can have a really powerful impact on their development as a person. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? You want to start us off with any stories of really great success?
Sure. So I teach band. So I was originally had been thinking about teaching math for a while, but as I was starting college, I ended up, deciding to do music education instead. So that is a huge thing that I notice as well, is that, you get a relationship with a teacher and you see them for 1 year, maybe 2 years if you get lucky in high school, right? So I teach, because of teaching band, I get to see them for 4. So that's great. But then, like you just said, in martial arts, you may start them when they're 4 or 5 or 6, and then get to see them until they graduate high school or even into adulthood in some situations. So it's really, really great. So we noticed that kind of like if we think about like 3 kind of different age ranges, we've noticed that like with the elementary age kids, that they usually have a little bit more like physical issues with self-control, whereas the like the middle school, high school age kids, more of like, like moral dilemmas with friends and, family and different things like that. Yeah. And then what we've noticed with parents is kind of different than both those things. but it's like, how do I raise kids? How do I coach kids at home? You guys do this all the time. You see this, the kids listen to you a lot better. And I'm like, well, they don't go home with me too. So those are kind of like the three big areas with character development that we were hoping to dive into a little bit.
Yeah.
So with the elementary age kids, we've noticed this, especially with students going back to school and almost having what we really think like a 2-year break from like interaction with their peers.
Yeah.
That like self-control is really lacking. And up until the last like year and a half or two, we haven't really had to have too many conversations about like self-control at school and when it's appropriate to use our Taekwondo, not to show our friends and different things like that. So this is it's an interesting conversation with families about that too. And just reiterating that in class. But we have had a few issues or, like brother or sister will hit each other or, like grab a kid on the playground kind of thing. And so that's those conversations we feel like are pretty important with kids. We have 3 or 4 kids in mind that we've talked about. And so we at one of the school rules that we have at our school, which is our last one, which is school rule number 13, is anyone not following any of the first 12 rules may be reduced in rank. And so so because part of Taekwondo, we feel, and the seminar and everything we did just from talking with instructors in Korea, they just reiterated our strong feelings about that, is that Taekwondo is not just physical. And a lot of people perceive martial arts, or at least their initial perception of that is, hey, it's great, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to get more flexible, I'm going to be able to punch someone, I'll be able to defend myself maybe. And, they focus on the physical aspect of it. Whereas I think as instructors and the more that you train and as an adult, you appreciate that a lot more, is that it really does take a lot of mental discipline to do some of the things that we do. And that mental discipline can spill over into so many areas in your life. And so when we are addressing like a mental situation, like a character quality that we're trying to foster in students, let's just talk about self-control with the little kids first off. One of the things that we do is when we have that conversation outside of the student with their parents, and usually a parent says, hey, can we talk with you about something? We're having an issue at home, or we had an issue at school, and it seems like they're using their Taekwondo for this, or they showed someone this, or they hit someone here or there or something like that. And I said, oh, well, yeah, that's something that we can take care of in class pretty easily. And they're like, oh, they're sometimes they're like, oh, that's great. And sometimes they're like, oh, we didn't think it would be that easy to solve that. And I'm like, no, we've done this before. We have a plan for this. This is not a hard fix. And so we don't have an initial conversation with the student the way that we usually approach it, because we believe that physical discipline leads to like the emotional maturity and that ability to say, here's the situation, and let's think about this before we act. Because just as we're reflective on how we practice, we can become reflective on every situation in life when we apply the same principles that we do to our Taekwondo. And so my kind of go-to exercise for the little kids is I have a Gatorade bottle, and it's just a small bottle of Gatorade, like the really tiny ones. But so we have the kids for the next 10 classes, when they come to class, they have to hold that out. I said, I think you know why you're doing this, and I'm going to borrow your belt for a little while, and you can stand in the back of class, and you've lost your rank. You get to practice with the white belts and the beginners again, because you've lost the opportunity to learn new things until you showed us that you can make good decisions with what we taught you. And so I said, I think you know what this conversation is going to look like. And if you don't, this is going to give you time to think about what that will look like. I said, your parents have come and talked with me about something. So there's a reason why you're doing this. And I said, this isn't punishment. I said, though you may feel like it, we need to discipline your body a little bit more. And by disciplining your body, I think that will cause you to be reflective as you're making choices over the next couple of weeks. And then you can take this time to think about what you've done. And then we're going to talk about this later. So it's kind of that idea that there's a conversation coming. And sometimes it takes kids a lot of time to gather their thoughts, right? You know, as adults, they say when a police officer or when anybody gets in any kind of conflict in the moment, you don't even realize, you don't recall within the first even day. Sometimes it takes 2 days or a week to even process all the things that happen, because it seems like things go in slow motion. You don't remember the details of everything right away. So we want to address kids that same way and give them the opportunity to say, hey, this conflict happened. You made this choice. I want you to think about that choice. And then we're going to come back and talk about that after you've really processed everything that's happened. So for 5 minutes, every time they come to class, they hold the water bottle or the Gatorade bottle out, and just right out in front like this. And I said, we're going to set a timer for 5 minutes. I want you to think about this. And then we're going to come back and talk about this. I said, you remember why we're doing this, right? And then so for the next 2 weeks when they come to class, or 10 classes, whatever that looks like for them whenever they come, then we have their belt for those 10 classes. And then at the end of those 10 times where they've done that, she'll lead a class, and I'll take however long it takes to have that conversation. Maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's a whole class. And I'll sit down and I'll not have that conversation in front of the other students, because that's a personal matter just for them. And so I'll have that conversation in front of the parents and just ask the parents not to interject, just ask them to observe the conversation. And then if they have anything that they would like to talk with me about after that conversation happens with their kids, then I usually talk with them again outside of their kids. So that's something that we've used several times, and you know, we feel like it's a really good process. I feel like it's a really good process to use. And the parents are always like, oh my gosh, like we didn't even think about this. And, you know, I always like when I was talking with Jesse about, you know, the quadrivium back in like ancient Greek, when we had the most like philosophical thinkers, arguably the most intelligent people that speak 4, 5, 6, 7, a dozen languages fluently, right? They would advocate for what we nowadays would call gymnastics, but they include a lot of other things too. Gymnastics wasn't just like tumbling and stuff like that. It was like honing the physical body to its peak, essentially, and using that honing to create mental discipline and a preparation for fertile soil for their mental education, right? All the other subjects that they'll study in life, and mental maturity. So I think of that the same way. Rather it be a physical obstacle they have to come or overcome, or just a kick they have to learn to test, you know, whatever it happens to be, to do a sit-up or a push-up correctly, that physical obstacle that causes them to mentally prepare themselves for this obstacle, and they can use that for preparation and other things. So that's the way we kind of approach a lot of younger kids, is giving them like a physical obstacle and the opportunity to reflect and think about their choices that they've made recently, and then how they can make better choices in the future. And then, you know, just touching base with them again in front of their parents. And that's oftentimes that might be a coaching opportunity for parents too, because sometimes we interact differently with them, with you know, with our students than they do, or sometimes it's the same. So every student is different. You can't talk to them all the same, but that physical aspect of that challenge and that opportunity for reflection time, and you know, just that obstacle seems to really help the younger kids especially. What do you guys think about working with younger kids and kind of that same thing?
Absolutely. You know, you said you hadn't been to Korea, but that punishment reminded me so much of things I saw in Korea all the time. You know, like they do this thing where
yeah,
you just got to hold it for 5 minutes. It looks easy, but it's very hard. Or you basically do a headstand on the ground with your hands behind your back like this. They have all sorts,
like a push-up except with your forehead.
Yeah. They have all sorts of creative punishments over there, and it does seem to be quite effective. So, you know, more power to you. I think that's a really interesting idea. I've never tried it myself, but, you know, from time to time I have had to take away a belt or two, and, you know, we definitely have it's not something I enjoy, and it's something I do at very last resort. You know, if the kid is just, you know, despondent and no longer in a state where I can get him back in any other way, then it's like, well, if I can't get you back, at the very least, I can take away the one thing that says that you are outstanding, have an outstanding attitude. So, I'm going to have to take that back until you show me this good attitude again. Yeah. What were you going to say?
And that's, and that's also, we completely agree on that. And like taking their belt is not something that we consider lightly, because
maybe 3 times.
Yeah, maybe 3 times in the last like 5 or 6 years. And so it's like, usually that conversation happens and that's enough. That conversation happens enough and that's enough. But it's, the times that we have done that, we have one student right now that's going through that, but we've had 3 or 4 conversations with him and his family and said, there's going to be consequences if this continues. We have to, change our pattern of thinking and the choices that we're making.
I was going to say that that's one of the things that I think sometimes modern parenting misses is consequences for actions. So I think it's a good thing that you're doing that, because it might be the first time in that kid's life that there was ever a line drawn in the sand that said, listen, if you don't get your stuff together, if you don't act in a certain way, this is what's going to happen. If I had to stand there
to make those mistakes.
If I had to stand there holding 2 Gatorade bottles for 10 days, 5 minutes at a time, I would definitely change my attitude. I'll tell you that much. So that's awesome. And I think that's very, very admirable, because it's not easy to do things like that. The easy way would be to do a more minor, sort of a lesser approach to disciplining. But I think taking a strong, bold stance like that is actually very difficult, especially in our modern society. So I respect that a lot. One of the things that I always tell my students is martial arts is a hare. And they always say, well, what do you mean by that? And then I have to tell them the story of the hare that was taught to me by my Apache Wolverine fighting instructor, which is kind of a Native American fighting art. And I'm going to summarize it to be very brief so I don't bore everyone to death. But basically, there was a young warrior and he had to go to battle the next day. And he was very worried because he had 2 kids at home and a wife, and he had never been to battle before. And he thought very likely he was going to die. And then what would happen to his family? And so he's up all night, tossing and turning in his bed. And he says, well, if I don't get some sleep, I'm going to be so tired tomorrow. I'm definitely going to die. So I need to calm my nerves, but I don't know what to do. So he goes and sees the wise man at the top of the hill. And he goes up there and he says, shaman, tell me how to calm my nerves. And he kind of looks at him for a minute and then pulls out one of his curly hairs and hands it to him. And he kind of looks at it perplexedly. The young warrior looks at it perplexedly and says, well, what do you want me to do? He says, straighten the hair. And the young warrior, tries a few times and then says, well, I can't do it. And he says, no, straighten the hair. And he tries a few more times. And every time he says, I can't. And the shaman keeps telling him, no, keep trying. You can do it. You have to believe in yourself. And eventually he gets really frustrated. He's just going. And he gets angry and he throws the hair down the ground and says, I can't do it. And the shaman says, yes, but for a minute, weren't you thinking about the battle tomorrow? Your mind was completely, focused on that activity. And that is what the martial arts are all about for me. When I first started the martial arts, I had a lot of young ambition. I wanted to be a great warrior. I wanted to learn how to defend people. I wanted to be the top competitor. But at the end of the day, I might use those fighting skills once or twice in my life if I'm unlucky. But I'll use those leadership life skills every single day of my life. And that's the most important thing to take away. Every time we pick ourselves up off the floor despite our fatigue, we teach ourselves to have indomitable spirit. When we say, yes, sir, we stand at attention despite our breathing being ragged, we teach that focus of mind and focus of body. And I think that is like the most important thing to take away. So I'm glad we're having this conversation, because some martial artists out there, they don't put a big focus on this. And this is something that has been slowly moving away from, especially in the more modern and progressive martial arts scene. I've kind of had my one foot in both camps, like one foot in traditional martial arts, one foot in MMA. And I've been basically riding 2 icebergs that were originally like this. And now they're like, that. And now I'm doing splits. And I'm like, guys, you need to get back together. Both have some really important things to teach each other. These guys over here, they don't care anything about respect and discipline and honor and all this kind of stuff, which I feel like is the whole reason we do martial arts. If we don't have that, we're no better than the wolves that are attacking the sheep. We're no better. Like, we have to be good people. We have to be sheepdogs, and we have to learn to live amongst the sheep, or we're going to be attacking our own. So I could keep going on and on, but you know, I think it's definitely something very important. What about you, Jesse? What have you seen on the floor? And
yeah, absolutely. So coming off of the conversation about holding the Gatorade bottle, right, and thinking about the spectrum of behavior, where one end of the spectrum we're seeing these extreme cases of maybe disrespect or discordance, or like where something is just like really challenging that the student is displaying. And on the opposite end of that spectrum, I'm curious about what character development looks like for those students who might be extremely reserved or very pulled into themselves, where, you know, like when it's time to, and I'm thinking about the young students specifically, when it's time to get out and demonstrate something or to play a game that's a little bit, you know, more challenging or more frightening, and they just go, whoa, like shut down, and they're afraid, and they say, I can't do it, I'm afraid, I don't want to do that. We ran in before the break, we ran into a situation like that during one of the classes, and me and my fellow assistant instructor were kind of looking at each other like, oh man, like this is one of the new situations for us. And so we kind of approached it saying, okay, well, you know, just reminding that student that we're not here to scare you, right? We're not here to make you afraid. We're not here to do these things to make you suffer, right? We're here to give you an opportunity to show us how brave you can be, and like, and kind of turning the conversation toward that opportunity for growth instead of like being subjugated under the thumb, right? And I'm curious to know from you, Master West, or from Mrs. West, like what those conversations look like with students, or your take on those conversations.
Yeah, great. Do you want to? Okay. So when you mentioned that, I have a couple of other students, in my mind, and man, they're amazing kids. You know, they're amazing kids. And, you know, they're both much more reserved. The two kids that I'm thinking about, you probably know one of them right away. And they're both boys, and they, when they know something, they know that they know it. You know, when they know something, they know that they know it. And if they don't know that they know it, then they're that exact student that you described.
Right.
You know, they're that exact student that you described. And even when they know that they know it, they're still kind of like, do I have to? You know, do I have to do this? And so you know, they're the kid that when they get their black belts, they're gonna sit in the back of the room, and they're just gonna like, just don't mess with them. Just leave them alone. Let them, you know, don't lock their books off their desk. You know, they're a bookworm. They're, you know, they're not the most outgoing kid, but when you get to know them, they'll be your truest, most loyal friend in the world. And so trying to kind of get them out of their shell, you know, being willing to take risks in front of other people. That's something, like you said, is always a challenge with those students. So one of the things that I like to do with students like that is give them a small group and give them something they're confident with. Like with those students, one of them in particular, he's been with us for about 1.5 years at this point, a little over a year. And he came from another school prior to that. So he's only gotten one promotion from us, because sometimes when they come, you know, the expectations are different in different places. So we have to kind of get them to where we want them. And we have those conversations with their families and like, no, you're good for what you know, but we want to push you more. We see that you're capable, and we know you can do this. And so he's met that bar, and now he's a real leader, and we'll let him lead small groups of things. And now he's starting to feel confidence in that. But it would first come with, I would give him the handbook and say, hey, can you, you know, I know you don't know these rules yet, but can you read these to the little kids? Can you work with the kids who can't read these rules yet? And can you guys study these together? So giving them like small tasks that they're like, oh yeah, this is not a problem at all. And giving them at the same time they get that task, it's a leadership opportunity. So with those kids that can't read, that are maybe a couple years younger than him, in one case, it was even his sister, right? And she didn't like that at all, but she got over it. And giving him that leadership opportunity so that when I say, hey, can you demonstrate this? Can you work with a partner and teach them this new thing? They have this well, I've already worked with them in the past. You know, we have this relationship. So it's like trying to, unbeknownst to them, get them to get other students to develop relationships with them that they don't see coming. And then giving them the opportunity to see those relationships flourish and gain more confidence in those things. And so that's one of the ways that I like to do that in class. And another way is like doing relays and putting them at the front of the line on a relay and letting them lead that relay. And then so they're given instructions to their group. Now it's moved from a mental activity to a physical activity, or vice versa. So now they're getting that physical, like outward demonstrative kind of opportunity to show their self-confidence as you know, and hopefully it's becoming a louder activity, and then they're getting confidence in that. Or give them, you know, you have to give really clear and directions to your group. Your group is relying on you, and then them building the confidence that way. In both of those directions, you know, it's giving them another thing is we'll even let the younger kids, like once they've gotten their first or second rank, once they get their yellow belt, we'll say, hey, can you come up and lead jumping jacks? Or can you come up and can you lead 2 minutes of stretching? And okay, you lead these, pick 2 stretches, or your favorite 2 stretches. We'll even let like the 5 or 6 year olds do. Hey, come up, what's your favorite stretch? Let's lead class in doing that today. And so even with the younger kids, building that, what my 5-year-old is up here leading stretches? What is this? You know, just having parents see that opportunity for leadership, even their little kids. And sometimes I think that as instructors, we see some things in the kids that their parents don't see, you know, and we see a totally different side of their kid. We're looking at it from a totally different angle than they are. And they're like, man, I never thought my kid could do this. Or man, I wouldn't have even thought that, you know, to put them in that position. I didn't think they could handle that. And I'm like, oh no, they're going to do it. Here, ready, go. And so with those, and then the kids are like, what? And I'm like, yes, it's your turn, lead.
Well, and then the second time they're more comfortable with it. First time they're freaking out, and then the second time they're more comfortable. The third time they're asking, can I pick me? Yeah.
And so opportunity for those kids there, it takes time to build the confidence with me, right? If they have confidence in me, then when I ask them to do something, says my internet connection is unstable. Can you see us okay?
You're kind of cutting it out, but we got you. Their voice is still clear, so that's good.
Okay.
Oh, maybe
so if the kids have confidence in us, hello.
Keep going.
if the kids have confidence in us as instructors, then they have confidence in themselves, ask us to do something. And then that confidence, like those character qualities, they'll bleed into other areas too. So then they'll find themselves leading at school, leading at home, leading a peer group instead of following an unhealthy peer group, you know, being a thermostat instead of a thermometer. That's a phrase we use with the parent time. We want your child as part of this program to develop leadership qualities and set the temperature in the room. We want them to set the atmosphere, set the attitude, set the expectations. We want your child to be a leader. That's what we're wanting to develop, as character qualities and leadership skills. So yeah, that's a great question, Jesse.
It's a really good line. Yeah, you know, it's a rare thing that a program teaches leadership. It's something that I think is kind of inherent in the martial arts. Although you'd be surprised, a lot of martial arts schools don't teach leadership. And I think it's a huge waste, because it's one of the greatest things that we can give to our students.
Absolutely.
kind of reminds me, you know, you can't really be a leader who leads by example until you've led by example. So by telling those kids, hey, go up there and teach the class, they're learning leadership by example by trying to run that class. And it's interesting, when I went to Korea, I was studying over there, and no disrespect to Koreans, because there's so many things that they do better than us, and there's so many great things I could go on and talk about. But one thing that was very interesting is it seems like maturity in Korea is a little bit different. Like they seem to mature a little bit later. And I think the reason is because they have so much more responsibility. When they become an adult, they have to take over the household. They have to, you know, have their own house and all these responsibilities. And because of that, they have kind of a little bit of a delayed adolescence, in my opinion. You know, they would still be telling kind of like, I remember I studied over there, and the Chinese and Japanese are similar. And I studied over there with a lot of Chinese and Japanese, and I was 25 years old. And in my mind, I was a fully grown adult, but a lot of these guys would be acting like they were in middle school and high school, the kind of jokes they were telling, the way they were acting. And it just seemed very juvenile to me. And in fact, many of my friends, they would still be living at home when they were in their mid 30s and stuff over there. It's quite common. And the reason why I'm saying this is not to throw any shade, because like I said, they have a lot of other aspects that they do way better than us. But I think it's, if you expect people to be older, they will act older. And so the minute you start treating a kid like an adult, he will become an adult. But as long as you keep treating him like a kid, he will stay a kid for the rest of his life. And that's something that was very clear to me. It was like, how your society is treating you will dictate how you're treated. Like when I was over there, I always felt like I was being treated like a kid. You know, I was 25 years old when I first went over there, and I was being treated like I was in high school. And I was like, no, I'm an adult. I'm an adult. And that's why those people who are the same age as me were acting still kind of like kids, I feel like. So the point I'm trying to make here is, for me, I don't see age, I see maturity when I work with kids. If you act like an adult, I'll treat you like an adult. And I think that's a very important precedent to make, because it really shows kids that they have a choice. It's kind of like drawing the line in the sand, like we were talking about before, holding those Gatorade bottles. You have a choice. If you want to be respected in this school as an adult, all you got to do is act like one. And you'd be surprised how many kids end up acting that way. In schools that I've trained at in the past, the kids are running around all crazy, and it's like a total madhouse. There's not a lot of decorum and discipline. In my school, it's like the kids and adults act basically exactly the same. And we have a family class that usually family classes in other schools I've trained at is mad. It's like a madhouse. But our school is great. It's like one of our best classes. And it's because our kids act like adults. We have I try to articulate this to my Korean master. He always struggles to understand. We have a very serious martial arts school. In his mind, when he thinks serious, he thinks, oh, they're trying to be Olympians. They're training like 4 hours a day and blood, sweat, and tears, and they're like working really hard. And we're not that kind of school. I mean, we do have levels of rigor. And once you get like blue belt level, the rigor is quite intense. We're sparring all the time and stuff. But our basic classes are very approachable. We try to make it so even the most out of shape person can feel like they have a place there. But the thing is, we're a serious martial arts school in our attitude and our approach to the martial arts and our interest in the martial arts. And we go into deep technical detail about things, and we don't treat children like they're well, even our 4-year-olds, we treat like they're big kids, honestly. We treat everyone with that level of maturity, and we treat the discipline with that maturity. We don't do a lot of cartoon logos and all this kind of stuff. We try to keep it very traditional, you know? And people, it's funny, the culture you create in your school is contagious, and people will come in and they will adopt whatever culture you set. I'm getting a little bit on a tangent here, but my master came to visit me the other day. In his school, you know, he came from Korea where it was train. It was ridiculous and brutal. When he came over here, he taught us like that for the first few years when I was his student. And then he just broke everyone, and he couldn't keep maintaining his students. So he decided to kind of baby the students a bit. And he's been babying them for so many years that now I go over there and they've just been babied to death to the point that like the 6-year-old says, "Oh, I'm too old to do this kick," and I'm like, "What? There's nothing you're too old for. There's nothing you're too old for." And
send them over here for a couple weeks, Master Olds. Send them over here. Buy them a plane ticket. They're going to be doing their splits in a couple months.
but then
keep them there. No, I'm just.
He came over here to sit in on a testing or two, and when he was here last, one of my students, he's in his 60s, and he's a great guy. Just never gives up, never stops bleeding himself, even though he's got a lot of medical things going on with his body. He can't really keep up with everyone, but he never stops doing those laps. He might be huffing and puffing, but he's always trying his very best. And I have a lot of examples of that in my school that I'm very proud of. When Grandmaster Kwan comes over and he's watching my students, and this guy comes puffing and puffing around. We have to run for 10 minutes at the beginning of testing. It doesn't sound like very much, but you'd be surprised. A lot of adults.
Oh no, it is
10 minutes, and they're like, and like, he's like, "This guy's gonna die." He's like whispering in my ear, "This guy's gonna die. You gotta stop." Like, and I'm like, no, he's got it, sir. And then he just cuts over me because he's my senior. He's like, "Sir, if you need to stop, I want you to stop right now. Like, I don't want you to hurt yourself." And this is what my student said: "No, sir, I got this. I'll never give up." And he just keeps running. And in my blown away, he was like, "What? I can't believe it." Because when my master does like running up and down the floor in his normal class, he's like, "Okay, adults, let's be careful here. Like, go slow, and he babies everyone like this. So what happens is, if you baby the kids, if you baby the adults, they'll all act like kids. If you treat the kids like adults and have maturity on the floor, and your approach to the discipline and everything you're learning is with that maturity, they will act that way. It's contagious."
If I can hop in quickly, I think this is a good transition moment to the middle school age and like the adult age groups that we were talking about a little bit at the beginning that you wanted to tap into. And so my question is, so as we are approaching these students and working with them in terms of character development, in terms of self-belief, and in terms of, what does this look like inside the dojang or inside this martial arts studio or outside the studio, at school, in the community. When we say, we want to treat them like adults, my question for you to lead into this next section is, well, what kind of adults are we wanting to treat them like, right? Like, what does it look like when these students reach adulthood, reach, middle school, like early adulthood, like adolescence, transitioning into that, but also, as they get later on in years, what does the developed martial artist adult look like coming out of these programs and coming out of this work that we do and that is really important?
Yeah, I would say it looks just like when Master Olds was talking about like the situation in Korea. I say it looks exactly the opposite of that. I would say that we have 6th graders. We have a 5th grader who's been in only trained with us since he started. And he's been training since he's been 4. And so he's been with us for 6 years, and he looks, acts, and speaks like better than most of the adults that come in with their kids. And so they look like that. And that's what a green belt in my mind looks like, is that we don't think of the students in terms of their age. We think of them in terms of their rank. And so like a 5-year-old and an adult can both be a white belt. And granted, they understand, because of the context of where they are in life, they understand things differently. And I may explain things differently. At the end of the day, they should both be able to teach the same thing to one of their peers, right? And help their peer understand that, be able to replicate that skill. That's what we ask of our students, is that when they get to the point where they're ready to test, that they can take what they know after they test for their next rank and they get that white advanced belt, that they can teach another white belt and be able to explain things in a way that someone their age can understand. And so our little 10-year-old, he's pretty much, he could teach any of the white belts, even the adults, and explain things in a way that they understand. So our goal is that as they advance in rank, that regardless of their age, they're more mature as a person. And so that's part of what we mean by character development, is it doesn't necessarily have to be based or maybe even thought about in terms of age, right? But in terms of, it's like when we were at the seminar, Master Olds, and they were talking about character as a black belt looks a certain way, right? And so when you are, you should have that integrity, you should have that self-control, you should have all those character qualities that we're looking for. And I'm really interested, slightly off topic, but I'm really interested in seeing like the character development curriculum from South Korea, from the Kooky one that they were talking about at the seminar. That's one of the things that we want to get a hold of and see what they're doing there when that comes out. But that's what we think about it in terms of character development in relation to age, is that the character of a 10-year-old can look exactly the same as the character of an adult, depending on where they start. But we expect that maturity as far as rank, and don't necessarily base it on age. But you know, different people at different ages, like we've been talking about, are going to deal with different situations in life. And so that was kind of what we just observed as we were thinking about in terms of characters, that like each age group struggles with a different thing. But as far as that goes, is, you know, I would expect just as much character from a black belt that's 13 as a black belt that's 40.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe they're dealing with different topics in life, but the way they deal with those topics and how they think and mentally approach those things should be the same. You know, it should be the same, because we've counseled them as white belts, we've counseled them as green belts, we've counseled them as red belts, and now they have their black belts. So they have I mean, it's not going to take a couple months to get your black belt, right? We talked about this, it's years. And so after that years of counseling and training, regardless of the age, whether they have a PUM rank or a Dan rank, they should be thinking and approaching the situations in life from that almost even playing field. And so that maturity that we see in a 13, 14-year-old black belt, and how they approach things, maybe even more maturity than a 25, 28, 30-year-old green belt. You know, and it's unfortunate to say that, but the reality of it is that black belt that's been with us since they've been 4 or 5, and now they're 12 and have their black belt, they've been training and getting character development for 8 years. Right. You know, whereas that green belt adult, they've been with us maybe 2 years. And so I mean, hopefully they're more mature because they're an adult, and hopefully they have more character because they're an adult, but because of just the training they've went through, that may look totally different. But if you have black belts that are at different ages, how they approach that with maturity and character development, that should all be the same.
Yeah.
So that's it's kind of challenging to think about it like that. I don't think maybe many people do, and I'd be interested to get you guys' take on that. But that's kind of our take on it, is that if I have a green belt that's 27 and I have a green belt that's 7,
yeah,
I should not be, I may be dealing with the same like character issues with that same person, just in different situations. You know, they're in different stages in life, so the situations they're approaching are different, but I may be dealing with the same issues. So
yeah, no, I love it. I think we're very similar of thought. And you know, it's surprising too, because I think it is a way of thinking that a lot of time is overlooked, and not every master instructor feels the way you do, but I feel that way too. And one of the things that's always frustrated me is, you know, unless you kind of grew up in the martial arts and was a kid yourself, training very seriously alongside some other kids who didn't really push themselves, it's sometimes hard to see how age doesn't matter that much. What matters is your drive. I have met some kids who are, you know, 12, 13 years old, who are more mature, more driven, more morally conscious than the parents that are dropping them off, who are in their 40s. Because here's a couple of things. Yes, the kid who's 13 doesn't have that much life experience to go on, but the guy who's 40 might have had 30 years of bad habit to unlearn, which can be even more of a barrier to overcome than youth and inexperience. And so, yeah, I don't think that's true. I don't think age necessarily equals wisdom at all. Yeah. I think everyone has a great story to tell, even people who aren't very wise. A lot of times they don't know their story, but everyone has a great story to tell. But I think extracting wisdom from your condition, your lived condition, is something that you have to take a lot of deliberation to do. Like, it doesn't just happen automatically. And most people, they just kind of cruise through life and they don't really think about their actions and what they're doing, and they develop bad habits. And you would be surprised. The hardest people to get on the floor at our school, we're a 50-50 adults, kids introing, okay? Most of the kids stay, a lot of the adults, they drop out right away. You know why? Because the parents, they don't have anyone to push them. And because they've lived a long time, like 40 years or something, and they develop a bad habit of quitting things that are difficult. With the kid, he's never quit something because it was difficult before, because this is the first thing he's ever done. So he doesn't know that he can do that. And if he doesn't even,
he doesn't know that he can quit, and he doesn't even know that how hard it is. It's like, this is the only frame of reference he has.
This is the bar, right? So he doesn't know anything. So you just say, no, you can't quit. You got to keep going. And then he learns to have iron grit for the rest of his life. Whereas the adult, this happens a lot. This is really funny. I tried to bring this up when we had that, when Grandmaster or Master Chan Lee was doing that seminar on business. I don't know if you were in the room with,
I was.
Yeah. And I tried to bring this up. I tried to say, hey, sir, you know, one thing that we have sometimes happen is you have a kid join, and then the parents will watch on the sidelines. You can tell the fire in their eyes. They're really excited to jump in there and train. And then finally, they work themselves up to the point that, okay, I'm going to try it. I'm going to jump on the floor. And then they do like one day, and they're like, oh, no way, can I do this? And they want to quit. They want to back out. And then they want to transfer their membership to their son, or they want to pull out or whatever. And I'm like, how can you quit so quickly? How can you quit so quickly? And you're the parent. You're the one who's supposed to. And they come up with all these excuses. Oh, my hurt knee, blah, blah. Dude, I have had something hurt on my body every single day of my life. Are you kidding me? You know, but I never let it to be an excuse. But these guys, they will. And no shade cast. I mean, I totally understand it. It's because it is very hard sticking with your commitments. But it is something that we can help you with. It's something that we've had to learn by being. I was forced onto the mat even when I didn't want to go, you know. And my mom, you know, like there were some times where I was like, I don't really want to go. And she's like, nope, we made the commitment. You have to go. And it taught me to have that domino spirit. And if I hadn't had that, I probably wouldn't have learned it. So some parents, you know, they didn't have that support network at home. They never learned it. But now they've gone 30, 40 years without ever learning it. And they've ingrained a sort of a response, which is, okay, when things get hard, I'm just going to back out. And that's something that's very hard to remedy unless we can get them on the floor.
Yeah. It's like they said, the physical development leads to the change in the mental attitude, or, you know, being able to cultivate that mental soil. It's just a totally different way of looking at it.
You know, we probably do have to wrap this up at some point. I know we've taken a lot of your time. We really appreciate it. But I wanted to kind of end with, are there any students that come to mind? You don't have to mention them by name specifically, but any kind of stories of students that just amazing transformation? Because I have, like I said, I wanted to be a teacher my whole life. I wanted to be an English teacher before, like kind of more like you. I want to teach within like the normal academic apparatus. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to be serious about this. I just want to do the martial arts. Not any shade cast on that. I think that's amazing. But the point is, I love teaching, and I've had a lot of great stories and examples of the power that we have in the martial arts to bring change to everybody's life. And it's sometimes funny that some of my best students start out being my worst student. Like I've had a lot of kids that I've like. One kid I'm thinking about right now, I dragged him off the floor, kicking and screaming and crying on his first day. His mom had to pull him out of the school. And now he's the top of his class. He's absolutely perfect every single day, his attitude. I had another kid, he flicked me off his first day of class. He gave me a middle finger right to my face. And he says, it's okay, my mom says I can do this. And he's one of my best students.
I'll give you some push-ups on that middle finger, why don't you?
No, it's so funny. Like, you know, sometimes when you have a kid who doesn't have anything, they have a bad attitude. But when you give them something, it's everything to them because they have nothing else in their life. And that seems to happen a lot with in the martial arts. I get these students who, you know, they got a bad attitude, but it's because they're missing something, whether their father left them when they were young and then they latch on to me and like, this is like one male role model I can have, you know, who I can look up to. Those kind of stories, there's a lot of different ways they can come to it. But usually I find that sometimes the worst student I have becomes my very best student, because it's the one thing that means so much to them in their life. What do you guys?
Yeah, I have a boy and a girl that are both, I mean, don't personally, I would adopt them, but at this point I have a boy and a girl that are just slightly apart in age. And when they both first started, you know, they probably were the worst students we had ever had. To be completely honest, like the boy could barely touch his knees. When we said stretch, he was like, that's all you got, was about that much.
Yeah.
And he's been with us since he's been a white belt now. He's in high school. I would trust him to lead class. You know, even if I wasn't there, I would trust him to lead class and do a good job, do a very good job. And
he's definitely a big leader in the school, and even the parents, like,
they're like, you're gonna make it to your black belt.
Oh yeah,
you're coming to class. And so his mom is just like pushing and pushing and pushing, because she sees, like we do, she sees like this one thing in his life, that this may be his career. This may be what carries him through the thin times, the difficult times in his life, whether it's with friends or with anything. This is, like you said, you've given them something and they've latched onto it, and they're like, you know, it's like almost all that they have in life. And it's not to say that he probably couldn't go into the trades and do other things, because he could be a really smart kid if he applies himself, but there's not a lot of things that he really, really wants to apply himself to. But with this, like, this gets him through. He's like, man, I get to go to class at the end of the day today. I can't wait to get out of school. I can't, you know, and it wasn't always like that. And so he's one of those students that have just become that way. And so he's, you know, went from not being able to touch his toes to being the model student, and, you know, I think beforehand, yes, sir, no, ma'am, yes, ma'am, being like formal with his etiquette to adults, like that wasn't something that was really practiced too much in their home. Not to say that they were a disrespectful family, because we've never gotten that air from any of them. And we love his grandma dearly, and his mom and his aunt. It's a blended family, and they're all amazing. And he is one of the role models in the school that we use all the time to demonstrate things and to do things with, and give him the opportunity to teach sometimes. And then there's another girl in mind. We do 3 awards each year. We do 2 most improved awards. One we give to a lady, and one we give to a male, and then we do 1 student of the year award. Last year, she was one of the 2 students that got most improved. And she's from an amazing family. They're great. You know, she's had a couple of social issues with different people. And it was from those issues that her parents stemmed a really good, almost familial type relationship with us. And they realized that we love and care for their daughter in a way that most people wouldn't, just teachers at school and those kind of things. And so from her parents seeing that we love her and care about her enough to talk with her about some of these serious situations and character, that, you know, they trust us pretty much with her life. And because she sees that relationship with us, it made her work harder in class, and she is now a role model student as well. You know, and she was just like Jesse had said, you know, what do you do with those students who are not really confident, who are very shy, who are, you know, like not outspoken, who are not, you know, any type of extrovert whatsoever? Like, that was her. You know, that was her. And she will volunteer to answer questions in class. Her relationships with peers have improved at school. She's outgoing. Her brother gives her rides to class because he wants to see her here. And her parents make sure that she's here at every time they can bring her. We've even picked her up for class before. And I mean, she's just so committed. But it's like you said, you've given them something to really care about and think about. And it's just one thing can make a huge impact on a child or an adult, a person's future. And so we're just happy to be part of that process for several students, but those 2 students in particular, we've just seen like social changes and change just in their physical appearance, the way they care for themselves, the way they think. It's just totally different than when they first started. And they care about themselves, and they care about their relationships with people and how they present themselves and how they speak. And, it's been a great change for both of them in a lot of areas. And their families are more involved at the school. Anytime we have like a celebration of any kind, or whether it's a Christmas party like we had recently or anything like that, the families always volunteer, hey, can we help with this? Can we bring some food in? You guys don't have to pay for everything. And we're like, no, this is part of what tuition covers. And they're like, well, we're going to donate stuff anyway, just because they want to invest in their kids, because they see how much martial arts and how much we've made an impact on them. So, so there's definitely stories like that too. We don't have any 60-year-olds yet. But when it happens, I'm hoping they have as much gusto as yours. But that's the goal, right? Is to give them something that passionate, something that they can be passionate and love and care about and invest themselves in, and feel like they make a change in the world around them while they're at it. So,
yeah. Well, Master West, it's been an absolute pleasure. Mrs. West as well. I feel like we had such a great conversation. We really covered a lot of ground, talked a lot about some interesting ways that we can help curate, leadership within the students and character development. And I know that's something that you're really passionate about, something that I'm really passionate about. I'm sure Jesse as well, and your wife. Any closing thoughts before we let you guys go?
You were one of the people at the seminar that I was hoping to keep in touch with. So I'm glad that we've taken the time to do that. And I think that we should keep doing that, whether it's on podcasts or maybe we'll make a trip down to Texas at some point in time. I think that would be awesome. It's definitely a place that my wife and I are interested in at least visiting.
Yeah.
Maybe moving to in 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll have to see. But we have definitely enjoyed this conversation, and we are hoping to maybe be on the podcast in the future, or at least definitely keep in touch with you guys.
We had a blast. It was a real honor having you, and we'll definitely keep in touch. If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.